She needs to open her mouth and then they can let her out.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Come on. That's ridiculous. They're only going to put something in her leg? That's not going to help. That's not going to help her open her mouth. Find out, and we're going to... They need to get justice for him. They need to get justice. We need to find out where he is. So we can stop. So we can stop the search. We need to stop the search.
We're gonna find out.
And we're gonna find out, and we're gonna keep doing the search until we find him. We're not gonna stop until the end. We're not gonna stop until the end.
That's not even funny. Not even fair.
My son is 5 years old. The reason I'm like this because I picture my kids. My son, he's 5, the same age.
Breaking news of the day, investigators making a sad discovery along Route 190 in Sterling, finding what they believe is the body of a boy missing for months. We're talking about Jeremiah Oliver, the Fitchburg boy whose disappearance sparked controversy for the state agency charged with watching over him.
Team 5 Investigates has been ahead of this story from the very beginning.
Investigators converged on this wooded area off of Route 190 South in Sterling this morning and discovered the body of a small child believed to be Jeremiah Oliver.
The body is consistent in height and weight with that of Jeremiah Oliver.
District Attorney Joe Early says the little boy's body was wrapped in a blanket, concealed in a duffel bag, but it's not clear how long he was there.
The body was found, not very, like I said, about 40 feet from Route 190, where they do grass cutting. It was almost next to the area where the grass cutting is conducted.
April 18th, 2014. Drivers hurried along Interstate 190 in Sterling, Massachusetts, unaware that just beyond the guardrail, hidden in a patch of brush, sat a suitcase. Ordinary at a glance, but inside was anything but ordinary. It held the answer to a question that had haunted an entire community for months. What happened to 5-year-old Jeremiah Oliver? Jeremiah had vanished the previous fall. His absence raised quiet questions. Why wasn't he at school? Why had neighbors stopped seeing him? Why did no one seem to notice? Families whispered, teachers worried, and yet official alarms were never sounded in time. The silence only deepened. When investigators finally opened that suitcase, the weight of all those missed chances came crashing down. Inside wasn't clothing. Inside wasn't luggage misplaced by a traveler. Inside was a truth that should have been uncovered long before. A truth that exposed not only what happened to a little boy, but also how so many people and systems failed to protect him. This wasn't a case of a child wandering away or slipping through the cracks by chance. This was something darker, more unsettling. A child gone from his own home, from his own family, without the systems in place sounding the alarm until it was far too late. For his father, it was unbearable. For his community, it was devastating. And for all of us who hear his story today, it forces us to confront one of the hardest truths. Sometimes danger doesn't come from strangers. Sometimes it comes from within the circle of trust. Before we continue, a quick note. Today's case involves the tragic loss of a child. While no graphic details will be shared, the subject matter may still be upsetting for some viewers. And before we go deeper, a quick thank you to Cuckoo79, one of our community members, for recommending this case to the community. If you're new here, please subscribe and let us know where you're watching from. And to our returning viewers, thank you for liking, sharing, and commenting. Your support helps keep these stories alive and pushes for the accountability every child deserves. So how did a 5-year-old's life spiral from innocent playtime to a hidden suitcase on the side of a highway? To understand, we must go back to the boy himself, his family, and the early warning signs so many people missed. Jeremiah Oliver was born in December 2008 in New Britain, Connecticut, to Jose Oliver and Elsa Oliver. From his earliest years, he was described as gentle and playful. He loved small toy cars, spent time outdoors whenever he could, and, like many kids his age, he latched onto a superhero, Spider-Man. When adults asked what he wanted to be one day, he had an answer ready: a police officer. Home life centered on siblings. Jeremiah was the middle child, with an older sister, Juliana, 8 years old in 2013, and a younger brother. The three were close in age, sharing space, toys, and the ordinary routines of a young family. Relatives recall a boy who was quick to smile and eager to be included, a child who followed his sister's lead but was beginning to find his own voice. In 2013, the family left Connecticut and relocated to Fitchburg, Massachusetts. The move placed Jeremiah in a new city and a new home at 5 years old, an age when school routines, neighborhood sidewalks, and familiar faces begin to shape a child's world. He was at the stage of learning letters and rules, of classroom structure and playground games. For a boy who loved superheroes and toy cars, Fitchburg offered a different backdrop, but the same simple joys: cartoons before school, family meals, and the promise of birthdays and holidays to come. Those who knew Jeremiah describe everyday moments rather than grand milestones. He was the child who wanted to help carry a bag of groceries even if it was too heavy, who crouched on the floor to roll a toy car in small circles, who looked to older siblings and adults for approval. He was the child who, when asked to tidy up, would try, sometimes slowly, sometimes with a distraction in hand, but he tried. That is the picture that emerges: a 5-year-old with ordinary habits and big hopes. What stands out most is how quickly children this age tie their identity to simple, consistent anchors: favorite characters, a few beloved toys, and the reassurance of family. Jeremiah's anchors were clear. He wore his superhero fandom on his sleeve. He played outside when the weather allowed. He talked about growing up to wear a uniform and help people. These are the details that matter for understanding who he was before anything else happened. They are the baseline for a child who had just begun school age, who should have had years of firsts ahead. First library card, first field trip, first bicycle without training wheels. This background matters because it tells us what was at stake. A child's ordinary life. No headlines, no legal language, just a 5-year-old learning how to be part of a family, a classroom, and a community. The portrait is simple by design. It should be. For Jeremiah, the story begins with a boy whose days revolved around play, routine, and the kind of future plans only a child can make. Jeremiah's parents, Jose Oliver and Elsa Oliver, were no longer together during the years that matter in this case. Custody records place the children primarily with Elsa. In 2011, a court granted Elsa a restraining order against Jose. That order shaped the household's day-to-day reality. Most contact with the children flowed through Elsa, and decisions about routines, discipline, and who spent time around the children were largely made in her home. By 2013, Elsa had begun a new relationship with Alberto Sierra Jr. He was in his early 20s at the time, and according to prior case filings, already had a record of violence that included assaults and threats. Those matters did not involve Jeremiah, but they are critical context for understanding risk. Within months of the relationship starting, Sierra's presence in the household grew. He spent increasing time around the family and, according to later statements, took on a role in setting rules and enforcing them. In practical terms, that meant a young boyfriend, rather than a long-standing parental figure, began acting as the primary disciplinarian inside the home. The shift was subtle at first. New adults enter families every day, and most mean well. That is precisely why this case resonates. Nothing about the early public details would have alerted an outside observer to imminent danger. The dynamics changed behind a closed door, inside ordinary routines. A trusted circle expanded to include a partner with a documented history of aggression, and that change recalibrated the power inside the household. This is where the betrayal of trust becomes the central theme. Jeremiah was not placed at risk by strangers. The threat, later documented through court actions and police complaints, grew from within the circle of care. When a new partner assumes authority in a home, that decision carries responsibility. It also carries risk that must be managed with clear boundaries, independent oversight, and honest assessment of past behavior. In this case, the balance tilted toward control and fear rather than stability and support. The why matters as much as the who. A parent under stress may welcome help with daily discipline. A partner eager to set order may step into that gap quickly. Without careful guardrails, that arrangement can harden into a pattern in which an adult with a history of violence becomes the chief arbiter of rules for vulnerable children. That is not an abstract warning. It is a documented risk in child safety research, especially when a non-biological adult partner gains rapid authority in the home. By early 2013, Elsa had primary custody. A new partner with a violent history had increasing access and authority in the home, and a 5-year-old's daily environment was being reshaped by adults' decisions. That is the framework needed to understand what comes next. But back in 2011, child protection authorities in Connecticut had opened a neglect case involving the household. Social workers met with the family back then, arranged services, and documented concerns. At that stage, the system was engaged, appointments were made, referrals issued, and case notes started a paper trail. Then, in January 2013, when the family moved to Massachusetts, the case transferred to the Department of Children and Families, North Central Area Office serving Fitchburg. A new social worker took over. According to later reviews, that worker read the transfer summary but did not review the full case history. The supervisor later acknowledged the same. That omission mattered. It meant critical context. Prior concerns, earlier referrals, and risk patterns never fully informed the new team's decisions. Policy required regular in-person checks with children in open cases. Across the first half of 2013, those visits did not occur as required. The record shows multiple missed monthly contacts, ultimately 8 missed opportunities. A family with a known history of involvement moved jurisdictions, and the cadence of oversight slipped. There were visits, but they were inconsistent and incomplete. The new worker was supposed to make a home visit in January 2013. It did not happen. 2 visits took place in February, none in March. In April, a home visit was recorded, but the worker only observed the children rather than speaking with them privately. Observations noted that the children appeared clean and calm. No private interviews were conducted, and no additional collateral checks were added that month. During that April visit, the mother said the children might travel to Florida to stay with a relative for the summer. That plan was never confirmed. No travel details were verified. No receiving caregiver was contacted. For a family with an active case file, that kind of statement should have triggered a specific checklist: names, addresses, dates, and a follow-up plan. It did not. In May 2013, a mandatory reporter raised a red flag. Staff at Reingold Elementary School in Fitchburg received a disclosure from one of the children about being struck with a belt. The report moved to DCF, and an investigator met with the mother and with Jeremiah at their apartment. During that meeting, the mother said she was already using services outside of DCF's offerings, and indicated that counseling and supports were being handled independently. The investigator documented the contact and the mother's statements. That May visit became a critical timestamp. It was the last documented time child welfare personnel saw Jeremiah. On May 20th, 2013, he was observed in the home. After that date, required contacts again fell off. No subsequent visit verified his well-being, and no follow-up confirmed whether the Florida plan was real or whether alternative services were active. Case notes did not reflect a closed-loop verification of school attendance, pediatric visits, or collateral interviews that would normally help triangulate a child's safety. The timeline is stark. A known case transferred across state lines in January. 8 required monthly checks were missed or only partially completed in the months that followed. A teacher's report in May triggered a short burst of activity, then oversight receded again. At each step, a specific safeguard, reviewing the full case file, interviewing the children privately, confirming travel, verifying services, was available and went unused or underused. This was not a single lapse, it was a chain. A missed file review led to underinformed decisions. Missed visits led to missed observations. An unverified travel plan became a blind spot. A mandatory reporter's alert produced only a brief response. The system had multiple doors through which to reach a child and confirm safety. One by one, those doors were left closed. This isn't about hindsight perfection. It is about process. Monthly contact requirements exist because risk can change quickly. Private child interviews exist because appearances can mislead. Verification steps exist because plans discussed at a kitchen table need confirmation. In this case, each safeguard represented a chance to intervene. There were 8 such chances. Each one mattered. In August 2013, Elsa Oliver moved her children into a new apartment on Kimball Street in Fitchburg. Within weeks, her boyfriend, Alberto Sierra Jr., was staying there regularly and assuming day-to-day authority in the home. Neighbors noticed a new routine, a young family settling in, a new adult present, and a household adjusting to tighter rules. The last confirmed sighting of 5-year-old Jeremiah by extended family occurred on September 14, 2013, during a visit tied to relatives in Connecticut. After that date, relatives later told authorities they did not see him again. No verifiable photos, doctor visits, or school records from the fall placed him in public view. As autumn progressed, concerns shifted from quiet questions to direct statements. In early December 2013, Jeremiah's older sister, Juliana, 8 years old, told a teacher at Rheingold Elementary School that she had not seen her brother in months and that she was afraid of what was happening at home. As a mandated reporter, the teacher relayed the disclosure through the school, which prompted a formal welfare check request. On December 13, 2013, Fitchburg police executed a search warrant at the Kimball Street apartment. During that contact, Elsa stated that Jeremiah was in Florida with relatives for an extended stay. Investigators followed up on that claim the same day and the days that followed. The relatives identified by Elsa denied having Jeremiah and denied any recent caregiving arrangement for him. With no independent confirmation of travel, no tickets, no verified itinerary, no receiving caregiver, police treated the Florida explanation as unsubstantiated. Court oversight followed quickly. On December 16th, a judge ordered Elsa to produce Jeremiah within 3 days. She failed to bring him to court or provide proof of his location. That same day, Elsa was taken into custody on reckless endangerment charges related to the welfare of her children. Alberto Sierra Jr. faced separate charges tied to the treatment of the siblings inside the home. By mid-December, the central contradiction was in plain view. A mother insisting her son was out of state, relatives saying otherwise, and no recent public trace of a 5-year-old who should have been visible at school, in a clinic, or in a neighborhood. The legal system had demanded an answer, and did not receive one. But if Jeremiah wasn't in Florida, where was he? With no verified location for Jeremiah, investigators expanded the case from a welfare check to a full-scale search. Detectives built a timeline, pulled school and healthcare records, and canvassed the neighborhood. Specialized units searched along riverbanks and wooded lots in and around Fitchburg. Through winter, officers and volunteers combed areas by the Nashua River and nearby trails, working grid by grid in snow and ice. Neighbors were interviewed repeatedly. Some noted odd changes at the Kimball Street address, including windows covered with dark trash bags and a household that rarely opened the door. Search plans widened beyond the immediate neighborhood. Teams revisited routes in and out of the city, checked locations tied to family and acquaintances, and reviewed tips from the public. Months passed without a confirmed sighting. No recent school attendance was located. No recent clinic records appeared. The absence of everyday documentation, attendance slips, routine appointments, made the search harder and sharpened concern. Investigators kept pressure on every lead. They rechecked names mentioned to officers and social workers. They verified travel claims against ticketing and itinerary data. Detectives mapped cell activity and known addresses for anyone connected to the household. The working assumption shifted. This was no longer a child who would simply reappear. This was a case where time worked against clarity. A break came from an unexpected place. Information relayed by an inmate at the Worcester County Jail pointed investigators toward an area off Interstate 190 in Sterling, Massachusetts. The location was specific enough to merit a targeted search. On April 18, 2014, officers found a suitcase roughly 40 feet from the roadway, concealed by brush. Inside were human remains later identified as Jeremiah Oliver. The discovery site was secured, photographed, and processed according to procedure. Traffic slowed as word spread. By day's end, the scene drew reporters and onlookers who had been following the case for months. The discovery ended the search, but not the questions. Detectives documented the site, logged items for forensic review, and arranged formal identification. The tone of the investigation shifted again, from searching for a child to reconstructing how he reached that roadside. Evidence from the scene, combined with months of interviews and records, would guide the next phases of inquiry. The community response was immediate. Neighbors and classmates' families gathered for a candlelight vigil outside the Kimball Street apartment, lining the sidewalk with flowers, small toys, and handwritten notes. In early May, a public funeral was held at Rollstone Congregational Church in Fitchburg. Jeremiah was laid to rest at Hope Memorial Cemetery in Worcester.
Jeremiah disappeared in September, but he wasn't reported missing until December, when his sister told employees at her school she and her siblings were being abused and Jeremiah was gone. Sources tell Team 5 Investigates they targeted this location following information gathered by the Worcester County Sheriff's Department. Jeremiah's mother, Elsa Oliver, and her boyfriend, Alberto Sierra, are both behind bars in connection with his disappearance. 3 DCF employees were fired after the state discovered a caseworker had missed monthly visits with Jeremiah since last April. Boy's body is now at the medical examiner's office.
Appears to be a homicide, so they're going to do everything they can. Sometime today, tomorrow, I would anticipate that the autopsy will be completed.
Now we are learning more about how the body of a missing boy was found along a Massachusetts highway. Team 5 Investigates first reported how a tip from the Worcester County Jail led to the discovery on Friday. And today we learned who that tip came from. Liam Martin in Fitchburg tonight.
He wanted to become a cop. He was always laughing all the time. He was very lovable.
At the growing memorial for Jeremiah Oliver, his father, his first time seeing this since learning his 5-year-old son is dead.
I'm sad and I'm very upset. At the same time, I mean, he was only 5.
Authorities found the remains Friday of a small boy in Sterling, positively identified them yesterday as Jeremiah.
I was worried. I was scared. I was hoping that it wasn't him. See that he was loved, even by strangers, and that feels good.
But Jose does want justice. Jeremiah's mother, Elsa Oliver, and her boyfriend, Alberto Sierra, are in jail already on child abuse charges. The Worcester County District Attorney has not yet said if the discovery of Jeremiah's body will mean additional charges against them.
I just want people to know that don't keep your mouth shut.
Please take him in your arms and comfort him. Let him know that his pain and suffering is over. Help his family. Oh my God, I'm sorry.
Everybody, from the bottom of my heart, for coming out in the cold to look for my cousin. I want to thank you guys so much. I really do. You guys were all there for me. I want to thank you guys as much as I can. Hey, now. Well, we want him, but he's better up there. I really do thank you guys.
When I ask myself, why do they have to take a death of a child for us to come together as we are right now? When is the abuse gonna end? There's so much hatred in this world. But I hope that from this experience, I hope that we do stay united and look out for one another, because this is beautiful. I wish I could see this all the time. But I know that my son is in a better place. But again, how can I say goodbye?
In the months that followed, a memorial bench was installed at Coggeshall Park, paid for through community donations, an everyday place where residents could sit, reflect, and remember a child who should have had years ahead. If this case breaks your heart too, subscribe and share, because every time these stories are told, awareness grows and children are safer. Following the discovery of Jeremiah Oliver's remains in April 2014, the case turned to the office of the Chief Medical Examiner in Massachusetts. Standard forensic steps were taken. The remains were transported under chain of custody, cataloged, and examined with the goal of identifying both cause and manner of death. The process was complicated by time. Jeremiah had been missing for months before he was found, and the body had been exposed to natural conditions outdoors. This limited what pathologists could determine with certainty. In forensic science, decomposition often erases key evidence, and investigators rely on what can still be observed: the condition of bones, any trace markings, fibers, or residue preserved in the environment. After a prolonged review and consultation, on February 4, 2016, the Chief Medical Examiner officially ruled Jeremiah's death as homicidal violence of undetermined etiology. That phrase carried weight. It confirmed without question that his death was not accidental and not natural. It was the result of violence caused by another person. But the term undetermined etiology signaled that examiners could not isolate a single mechanism, such as strangulation, blunt trauma, or another precise factor, due to the condition of the remains. For investigators, the ruling gave them what they needed legally: a confirmation of homicide. For the family and the public, it left difficult gaps. There would never be a clear medical explanation of exactly how Jeremiah died, only that he was the victim of a violent act. The autopsy findings became a central turning point. The classification of homicide elevated the case and reinforced what investigators had already suspected, but it also underscored the challenges ahead in court. Proving responsibility without a clearly defined cause of death would require building the case on testimony, prior abuse evidence, and circumstantial proof rather than a single forensic conclusion. From here, attention shifted from the medical examiner's office back to the courts, where charges, pleas, and strategies would determine the next chapter in Jeremiah Oliver's case. Once investigators established that Jeremiah was the victim of a homicide, the case moved into courtrooms. In 2014, prosecutors brought charges that reflected what they could prove at that stage. Elsa Oliver was indicted on counts tied to child endangerment of the surviving children, and Alberto Sierra Jr. faced indictments for assault and related offenses arising from his conduct in the household. Across the next several years, the Commonwealth advanced the case in phases while continuing to develop evidence. In 2017, major plea outcomes were entered. Elsa Oliver pleaded guilty to charges including assault and battery and 2 counts of reckless endangerment. The judge imposed a 7.5-year sentence structured across multiple counts. The plea acknowledged criminal responsibility for endangering the surviving children and for conduct that violated fundamental duties of care. That same year, Alberto Sierra Jr. pleaded guilty to multiple assault charges involving the mother and the siblings. He received a state prison sentence of 6 to 7 years, followed by a period of supervision. These convictions covered assaults within the household that prosecutors could substantiate through testimony, records, and corroborating evidence. The pleas placed formal findings of guilt on the record without a trial, locking in consequences for conduct against the family members who remained alive to speak. A key strategic decision also occurred in 2017. Prosecutors withdrew certain homicide-related counts connected to Jeremiah at that time. The public explanation centered on avoiding double jeopardy complications and preserving the ability to bring a full homicide case when the evidentiary posture was stronger. In practical terms, the Commonwealth banked the assault and endangerment convictions while keeping options open for a later murder prosecution supported by additional testimony, forensic review, or grand jury evidence. It was a calculated move aimed at protecting the integrity of any future homicide trial. The legal picture included charges against people who, according to investigators, hindered the search for truth. Christian Sierra, Alberto's brother, was later charged with offenses including perjury, misleading investigators arising from statements he made during the inquiry. Two others, Ashley M. Cormier and Kaylee Thabarge, with misleading police in connection with their interactions with detectives. These cases underscored a pattern that courts often confront in child endangerment investigations. When adults with inside knowledge provide false or conflicting accounts, the timeline fractures and critical leads grow cold. By the end of 2018, the record showed 3 pillars. 1. Felony convictions for Elsa Oliver and Alberto Sierra Jr., based on assaults and endangerment, proven independent of Jeremiah's medical findings. 2. Charges against associates for obstruction-type conduct that impeded investigators. And 3. An unresolved question of ultimate accountability for Jeremiah's homicide, preserved for later action by the charging strategy adopted in 2017. From an advocacy standpoint, the timeline illustrates how systemic gaps and misleading statements can slow the path to accountability. Securing plea convictions for assaults and endangerment protected the surviving children and established a foundation of facts. But the most consequential question, criminal liability for Jeremiah's death, remained open at the close of this period, not because the case was abandoned, but because prosecutors chose to protect the future viability of a homicide prosecution. On May 18, 2023, a Worcester County grand jury returned 2 indictments against Alberto L. Sierra Jr., murder and disinterring a body. He was arraigned the same day in Worcester Superior Court, entered not guilty pleas, and the judge ordered him held without bail, pending further proceedings. At a bail hearing a week later, defense counsel argued for release, citing Sierra's rheumatoid arthritis and his participation in a clinical trial. They claimed detention would interrupt his treatment. The court rejected that request, ruling that he would remain held while the case moved forward. The indictment did more than revive the unresolved homicide. It also laid out the allegations prosecutors were prepared to prove in court. According to those filings, Alberto was responsible for causing Jeremiah's death inside the Fitchburg apartment during the fall of 2013. Prosecutors allege that after Jeremiah was killed, Alberto became fearful of the consequences and sought to hide what had happened. They argued that Elsa Oliver, the children's mother, assisted afterward, helping to conceal the fact that Jeremiah was no longer alive, and providing cover stories about him staying in Florida with relatives. These allegations filled in the narrative gaps that had lingered for nearly a decade. The child's sudden absence from school, the explanations that never matched reality, and the silence that persisted for months. Investigators claimed Alberto moved Jeremiah's body more than once before eventually leaving it in a suitcase along Interstate 190, where it remained hidden until April 2014. From there, the prosecution's case centered on 2 points: the medical examiner's finding that Jeremiah's death was homicide, and the combined testimony and evidence suggesting Alberto and Elsa concealed the truth to avoid accountability. As of August 31, 2025, the record shows no verdict in the murder case. The matter remains pending in Worcester Superior Court. Allegations presented by the Commonwealth stand as prosecutorial claims, not adjudicated fact, unless and until a jury renders a decision. If you want to follow every turn of this ongoing case, subscribe. We'll continue covering the updates as justice unfolds. The discovery of Jeremiah's death exposed not only the failures within one household, but also the shortcomings of the very system designed to protect children. A review of Department of Children and Families records showed that required monthly visits had been missed on at least 8 occasions. These were not optional check-ins. They were mandated safeguards meant to confirm a child's well-being. Each absence represented a chance to intervene that slipped away. When these failures became public, accountability reached into the agency's leadership. Several frontline staff, including the assigned social worker and supervising personnel, were fired. In April 2014, amid mounting criticism, Olga Roche, the Commissioner of the Department of Children and Families, resigned under public and legislative pressure. The case had revealed glaring lapses in oversight and sparked outrage across Massachusetts. In 2016, the Child Welfare League of America conducted a formal review. Their findings confirmed neglectful handling and widespread mismanagement within the agency. However, they stopped short of declaring that the department directly caused Jeremiah's death. The message was clear. While the ultimate act of violence occurred behind closed doors, systemic gaps gave it room to go undetected. The broader lesson extended beyond the agency. Parents, teachers, and community members were reminded to trust their instincts. When something feels wrong, a child absent from school for weeks, sudden changes in behavior, or unexplained answers, concerns must be voiced and pursued. This case illustrated that silence or hesitation can allow danger to deepen. Vigilance, reporting, and follow-through are not optional. They are essential. Jeremiah Oliver's story is remembered not only as a family tragedy, but as a symbol of institutional shortcomings. His name is tied to reforms, memorials, and a push for stronger child protection practices in Massachusetts. A memorial bench in Fitchburg stands as a reminder of what was lost, but also of what must be protected. If Jeremiah's story moved you, share it. Every view, every comment, every share keeps awareness alive, and awareness saves lives. Subscribe now to join a community that believes no child's suffering should ever go unseen. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.